Hi, third grade. I'm going to read you this book called Blue Whales and Buttercups. It's about different organisms or living things and how they have specific parts of them that help them adapt or adjust to their environment or their habitat to help them survive. How organisms are different. There are so many different kinds of animals, plants, and other organisms on Earth. There are polar bears, redwood trees, nine-armed sea stars. Scientists put organisms into groups called species. Earth has more species than you might expect. Even types of organisms that might seem like one species are often divided into different species. For example, there are actually many different species of whales. There are blue whales, humpback whales, gray whales, and more millions of different species of organisms on Earth. Organisms have different traits. So here's the word trait right here. A trait is anything you can observe about an organism, including the way it looks or acts. Some animals have fur, others have feathers. Some plants have flowers and others do not. Some animals protect themselves by running fast. Others protect themselves by biting. We call these differences variation. Let's look at some examples of variation. Organisms grow to different sizes. You can find lots of variation in the sizes of different organisms. Compared to people, elephants are huge. Still, it would take about 20 big elephants to match the weight of just one blue whale. The biggest trees weigh more than 40 blue whales. You can find huge size variation between organisms in similar species. For example, the largest species of bat is 10 times bigger than the smallest species of bat. So it shows that here. And blue whales are the largest animals in the world. And here it shows some size variation as well, different organisms. See these small plants here? You can only see them with a microscope. Organisms get around in different ways. All animals move, but different animals often move very differently. Animals may walk, run, fly, swim, or slide. Plants don't move around the way animals do, but their seeds get from place to place in different ways. We can see lots of variation in the many ways that organisms get around. So this is all about movement, and every living thing can move. Same over here. See, if you look at this plant, its burrs help it get around by attaching themselves to animals and getting placed in different areas where they can grow. Organisms protect themselves in different ways. Organisms are often in danger of being eaten. Many animals eat plants. Some hunt and eat other animals. Organisms protect themselves from danger in a lot of different ways. There are differences or the examples of variation. So we talked a little bit about this year how consumers eat producers and how some consumers eat other consumers, and these are some ways that, see, here's a producer right here. This looks like a plant to me, and it has spikes, has thorns, and that's one way that this organism protects itself from predators. You can see more protection here, like a hard shell, spines, shell. Okay. Camouflage. Even in one species, organisms are different. In this book so far, we've been looking at variations between organisms in different species. When you compare different species, you can find lots of variation. However, within the same species, organisms can have different traits. So an example of that would be that we're all humans, right? Every single one of us reading this book right now is a human. That's our species. But we all look different. We're all different looking humans. So there's variation in the way that we look, even though we're one species. Oh, pigeons, there's another one. In New York, you've probably seen pigeons that look very different. And here's an example of that. Like this one is white with spots. This one has some green and gray, but they're all the same species. It's easy to observe how living things are different. Living things are the same in important ways too. Noticing how living things are similar can be harder, but it's still useful. How organisms are similar or the same. Different species are related to each other. Scientists study a species and ask, what other species is this species closely related to? To show how closely related different species are, scientists use evidence, right? They get some of their evidence by observing the traits of species. They compare those traits. When two species have similar traits, it may be evident that they are related. Still, different species have similar traits without being closely related. For example, a red bird and a red flower both have the trait of being red. That does not mean they're closely related. Scientists look at lots of evidence before they say which species are closely related. So here's some evidence that these three animals or organisms are very closely related. So if you look, you can observe how these three animals have traits in common. Here's one that I'm noticing. I see they all have a bushy tail that's about the same size and length. They all have like a similar nose. They all look like they might be a similar size too. Okay, look at the two organisms below. Which one is more closely related to the red bird above? So, I think it's trying to trick you by using color here, right? The color of this plant, or this flower, is red, and it matches the bird, but we know that, of course, this yellow bird is probably more closely related to the red bird. Scientists put related organisms into groups. One group is plants. Plants make their own food using sunlight. We know that those are called producers. Another group is animals. Animals eat plants, other animals, or both plants and animals. So these are very big groups made up of smaller groups. The smaller group is the animal that has 4 limbs, right? So here's an even smaller group of animals that have 2 arms and 2 legs. Some organisms have 4 limbs. So a limb is like an arm or a leg. Animals with 4 limbs are in one group of related organisms. Even though a lion might not look like a frog, these animals have an important trait in common: a body with 4 limbs, 2 arms and 2 legs. A human and a rat are also similar in this way. The fact is that all these animals have 4 limbs, and it's one piece of evidence that scientists use to show that we're related. A bird's wing is a kind of limb too. Birds have 4 limbs, 2 legs and 2 wings. The wing of a bird has the same basic bones as your arm. These limb bones are evidence that birds belong in the same group as lions, frogs, rats, humans, and other animals with 4 limbs. So if you look here, you can see 4. Human, bird, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The group of animals with 4 limbs is a big group, and it contains even more smaller groups. Some organisms have feathers. A smaller, more closely related group is made of birds. All birds have feathers to cover them. This trait is similar among all birds. That similarity is an important piece of evidence that all birds are related. Birds do not all look alike, though. Each species of bird has feathers that make it look different from other birds. Colorful feathers help birds attract mates. Brown and green feathers help birds to hide in trees. Let's look at an even smaller and more closely related group with even more traits in common. Some organisms are blue jays. This category of birds can be divided into many different species, such as blue jays. A species is a group of organisms that are very closely related. The organisms in a species have important traits in common. For example, blue jays all have blue wings and black markings. They have strong feet for perching on branches, and their similar traits are evidence that blue jays are all closely related. Here's some pictures here. There are millions of different species living on Earth. Still, all organisms on Earth are at least similar in one way. All organisms are related. There is one way that all organisms are the same. They are all made of the tiniest parts of living things called cells. Many organisms have only one cell. Other organisms are made of many cells. Whether they're big or small, plant or animal, all living things are made of tiny cells. Cells are the basic parts that make up an organism. Being made of cells is a trait that all organisms have in common. This is evidence that all organisms are related to one another. Even though organisms can be sorted or be so different, we are all related. Okay, so here are some important words I want us to remember. Okay, variation, that word means differences. Trait, so this is something that can be observed about an organism, such as color or size. So those two things are really important. An organism, a living thing such as a plant or an animal. So an organism is any living thing. Those three words are going to be really important for your work that you're going to do today.